Exodus is not really a story about Israel or a story about Pharaoh. It's not even a story about Moses. Exodus is a story about God. Exodus is a story about forgetting who God is and what it means for me right now. It's a story about rediscovering God's name, his character, his person, because he comes to show himself to me again. He climbs down into the darkest valley to remind me of who he is. Read on from the burning bush and you'll discover what Moses discovered, God's name. You'll discover a God who hears and a God who cares. I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. In Jesus, we're reintroduced to a God who, at the peak of his popularity, when the crowd around him had built to a noisy mob so he could barely hear, as he is making a triumphant march toward Jerusalem to be crowned as king, stops because he hears one blind beggar at a roadside named Bartimaeus calling him by his name. In Jesus, we're reintroduced to Yahweh, to the God who hears and the God who cares. In Exodus, we discover a God who defends. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. That was Yahweh's simple message to Israel when they stood at the Red Sea. In Jesus, we're reintroduced to a God so righteous in anger at the oppression of his people that he flips tables to defend the bullied and speak up on behalf of the voiceless. The God who defends. In Exodus, we discover a God who provides, who rains down bread day after day for hungry people. In Jesus, we're reintroduced to a God who provides, who spreads a buffet table with leftovers for more than 5,000 in the wilderness. In Exodus, we discover a God who forgives. In Jesus, we're reintroduced to the God who picks up an adulterous woman after every accusing voice has been silenced, who does not condemn her but rescues her, a God who forgives. In Exodus, we discover a God who redeems. In Jesus, we're reintroduced to a God who goes into both the spiritual and family history of a single blind man to rewrite generations-old traumas, a God who redeems even those places in me that seem permanent, unchangeable, unredeemable. Now, not a single one of those people who encountered Jesus cracked some spiritual code or pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps. All of those people were encountered by God, a sudden and startling awareness of the presence of the living God with them in a dark moment in their story. Moses at the burning bush, me nibbling unreasonably fancy falafel in the English countryside. You've got your own moments. Exodus is not a story of a people who escape. It's a story of a God who rescues.